And here we have a look at this really cool staff here, and kind of see what it is. So, he ran away. The Apostle of Argus. Interesting staff. Interesting staff there, following River of Death. So very cool, nice and shiny. Lots of things here. Nice epic mog that's going on here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Metagame Book Club. So we're here for track 2 for the win, and we're going to cover the secondary piece.
Okay, Chris, why don't you go back to that person so that people could understand exactly what we were doing there. What we were doing there is we wanted to give you a little show of an epic piece. And if you recall that in week 2, there is talk about an epic piece, and they talk about when there's no Guilo to go ahead and to help through a raid, that they go looking for these prestige pieces. And what Chris is actually following here is somebody in the wild on Area 52 who's flying away now. So that's going to be kind of hard to track. But that person did have an epic piece on. In fact, before we started the broadcast, we were all looking at it and wondering about exactly what was going on there, and where did they get that piece, and how expensive it was, and how much effort would actually have to happen to go ahead and get that piece. So now I'll turn it back over to our intro.
Anyway, the U.S. has the button.
And also I found someone else who has a second piece as well. So here's someone else who has a different version of a similar model. So you can see there's a red and a blue one. So today we're talking about the second track for the win. So we're going to talk about what's going on in the book. So again, this is For the Win by Cory Doctorow. So, and today's overview, we're going to go over the reading a little bit. We'll have Blue talk about the character progressions, and then Kay and I will talk about Arbitrage, Forecasting Models, Envy, and Area 52, and we'll wrap up with an overview of what's coming up for next week. And the other thing is we have a few more people here with us. So we have Cam.
Hello.
And we have Trish. And we also have Jerry.
Hello.
And of course we have Grid. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn over the presentation to Blue to talk a little bit about the Week 2 readings and talk about some of the characters and what they've been up to.
Thanks, Chris. So I'm apologize for not having a camera tonight. I don't know where it is. It flew away somewhere. I'll have it back next week, I promise. But so let's get started. We were reading between sections. It's all about the gold.
Somebody arbitraged.
And Yasmin didn't see Mala anymore. And this was about 100 pages. I mean, it was like 93, 90, 94 pages. So hopefully that wasn't too bad. But we saw a lot of things happening. When I say that, we had lots of conflicts. We had lots of cliffhangers with some of our characters. Like, we don't know what's going to happen to them. So, let's get right into it. Characters who's who so far. And so, talking with our existing character recap, we have Matthew, Leonard, and Mala. Those are our three main characters that we're starting to see to intertwine in their stories. So, when we last left Matthew, he was finishing up a raid with some of his buddies. One of them was called Lou. And if we remember correctly, Wei Dong, or Leonard from California, he has a friend that he plays with who's also named Lou. So we're drawing the connection that Matthew and Wei Dong actually know more about each other than we think. Matthew had just scored lots of money. He was raiding, he was getting gold, and he did it before the games knocked out their accounts. And so he was sitting pretty with lots of money. But then Boss Wings Hitman came in and were like, you can't do that, and they started beating him up again. But afterward, they're like, we want to offer you a deal. We are not happy that you are taking what you learned in the factory, even though he's good at what he does naturally. They say you can open up a franchise or an extension of Boss Wing, his former employer, but he's going to have to give 60% of everything he owns. Now, previously, their last score had over $13,000. 60% of $12,000 is how much, Abacus? Oh, Chris, what would you say? What's 60% of 12,000?
60% of 12,000.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna make you do math here as well. So
Oh, well, you know.
it is 7,200.
7,200 of the 13,000 that he earned. That's over half, and that's only leaving him with less than 4,000 to work with. And I mean, he had done hours of work. They had been there from the morning all the way till early morning the next day, and they're only gonna leave with 4,000. Granted, that's not bad. I mean, working wise, I mean, an 8-hour shift will get you hopefully maybe over 300, around 300. So 4,000 is not bad, but it's still a lot of work. And I mean, he still has to pay the internet cafe for working there. He still has to pay his friends for helping him. He's gonna divvy up the money. But it's not sitting pretty with us that he's now having to work under Boss Wing again, but as a business agreement, we'll say business agreement, of him giving 60% of his cut to Mr. Boss Wingman. Now, Wei Dong, Leonard, last time we left him, he was pretty epic. I mean, granted, he was playing video games in school. He got in trouble in the principal's office. He has the prospect of going to military school. On his way home, he gets into a car accident with some tourists, and he leaves the car crash area, and he just runs away. I don't know what kind of injuries he sustained, probably a concussion, maybe something else, but I mean, walking out of a car crash and just running away, I mean, I don't recommend that for anybody, but I mean, that's pretty epic for this teenager, like 16, 17-year-old. He runs off to Disneyland to collect his mind. He thinks, like, I should be collecting money. He disposes his phone, and this chapter is going on, he's like, oh, TV. He learned some stuff from the TV, so he put the cell phone away. He had to because it has GPS tracking. And so he hides off into the Chinese town of San Francisco so that he can't be found by his parents. And he's using like different routers and different secret codes to try and mask his walking within his email and to still be able to play. But he's still trying to make a living, trying to like, I'm a runaway now. This is my life. This is what I'm choosing to do. So it's pretty interesting. I'm really curious to see where that's going. I mean, I kind of want to see Wei Dong meet up with Matthew and his friends. Possibly he could, but we'll see what happens with that. Now, Mala. Mala's story has kind of taken a tone for like a reality TV show. Mala's best friend, her lieutenant, who keeps everybody in line posting. They were the closest. They've been known as sisters. And I mean, that's a really big compliment for strangers, especially in India. If someone calls you their sister, calls you their sister or their brother, it's not just some passing notion. In a cultural sense, that's really high respect. And Mala really does have high respect for Yasmin, as does Yasmin to Mala. But Yasmin is really feeling for Big Sister Noel. Big Sister Noel has come into the picture now. She's this faceless entity that is working for the IWWWW, which is the International or Industrial Workers of the World Wide Web. And she's wanting to form a union with other people who are working in games. in these different continents, whether it's in India, whether it's in China, whether it's in Russia or Europe. She's trying to reunite everybody. And Mala's like, I don't want anything to do with this. I just want to get paid. I have to keep a roof over my family's heads, and I have to pay my army. I'm really sorry, I can't help you. Yasmin, on the other hand, is really feeling for her. And it kind of sets rifts between Mala and Yasmin. So, can we go to the next slide? It should be one that says Yasmin on it. This is my visual representation for Yasmin. She's very calm, she's very collected, but she has like this caring sense in her eyes that you can't really escape. And she's always been that way. Even though she's the lieutenant for Mala, or formerly the lieutenant of Mala, I mean, she was always the motherly figure. She was the big sister to the other people in the army, and that's why they listened to her, they respected her in that sense. She didn't have to use fear, she didn't have to use any kind of discipline. She was just, you should be doing something, why aren't you doing it? And I'm sure we've had lots of people in our lives that are in that sense, like they are passive aggressive, where they don't have to really lift a finger to tell you to go do something. She's a good teacher, she's like a caregiver, she's trying to support her family, but I mean, it's hard now that she's walking on her own, and she's kind of working with the Webbies, with the Weeblies, with Big Sister Noel, and I mean, she's getting paid, but not as much, definitely not as much. And so, trying to realize that, I mean, she really wants to help Mala see that they deserve better working conditions, they deserve to be paid better, but it's created a very, very internal conflict with her, because she feels really bad about what happened. And I mean, she wants to go to her friends, she wants to make up, and she wants to be best friends again, but this difference that they have about the beliefs on whether they should be in a union or not, because being in a union, that it's not something that you can just, oh, I choose to be in the workers union. No, you have to participate. I mean, you're participating for better wages, for better working conditions. But what that might do is that it might cost you your job in the meantime, so then you have workers' compensation coming in. But it's still not as much money, but I mean, you're working to do better. But at the same time, when you're not working for them, they hire scrubs or people who aren't of good caliber, but they're coming in to do the work for the work that you were going to do. And Mala doesn't want to be replaced. She's happy where she is, she has a job, and she wants to stick to it. But we're going to keep watch on their story as we continue. If you go to the next slide, we have the Weeblies. Now, the Weeblies are a very faceless organization. We have, in the center, we have Big Sister Noel. She's like this, I want to come save everybody. But she's very determined, and it's not that she doesn't have a no-nonsense policy. She's like, I want to help. If you don't want it, fine, but I still want to help you. To the right of her in the red robot suit, we got the Master Krang, and he's kind of her like muscle guy, but he's the very charismatic muscle guy. That he can talk, he does different languages, and I mean, he's the announcer. He shoots lots of video, and he helps promote the cause of the Weeblies, helps promoting the industrial workers of the World Wide Web. And he's kind of their voice. Big Sister Noel is the figure that comes into all the games. Just Bob, she's wearing the mask. She doesn't really have a personality, but she's good at what she does. When she says that in the chapter, it means is that whatever game she goes into, she's very well integrated. She has lots of connections, and she's very versatile. And she knows how to set things up, and she knows how to do tactics. Big Sister Noel knows how to do the tactics as well. She's loved playing the games, and she's the leader of the Weeblies. And we haven't seen the Weeblies come into the lives of Wei Dong or Leonard yet, but I think we're seeing the Weeblies kind of info onto where Matthew is, but most certainly where Mala and Yasmin's story come in. So they're definitely people to keep watchful. If you go to the next slide. So this is our Mr. O'Connell. Pickel. I'm not quite sure the pronunciation for that one. Forgive me. But he's our graduate student. He's working on economists and number theory, and I'm probably getting that wrong, but he's all about figuring out how money works and how it evolves and interacts with our world. And he comes into the epiphany, this big aha moment of how virtual goods are being the arbitrary of real life money. And what that means is that these virtual items, even though they're zeros and ones, they're just data, they hold value for real life people, in which case people will give real life money to these items that don't exist. And he's figured out a really exciting formula. Let me see if I can find it real quick because it's really cool. Sorry. It's difficulty, difficulty plus friends, plus interesting strangers, plus reward, plus opportunity equals fun. And that's the layman's version of his formula explaining why people will pay for stuff online, why people will play these games, and why they will spend money, real life money, for virtual goods and items. And it plays a really huge role. Later, I know on his chapter he's very eclectic. He's foxholed himself in his apartment in which he's being evicted from because he hasn't paid rent, because he's been working on this formula for days, weeks even, not budging from his computer, buying virtual goods, selling them, seeing the accounts, seeing the exchange of money, and testing out his formula, his theory. And when we finish off, he's exhausted, he's collapsed on the floor, but he's rich. He made bank. His PayPal account is filled to the brim with money. He broke the system, and all of his accounts are banned for the time being. But he got out. He has all this money. We are trying to see what he's going to do. If you see his name again, definitely pay attention to his chapter, because he'll be a big player later on. So I'm on to the next slide. I'm not sure of this one, so I'll leave it up to you guys.
Okay, well, first of all, what I'd like to start with is we've been getting a lot of chat comments, and I'd like people to bring that in, because it was like you were being polite and you didn't want to interrupt Blue when he was talking. But I've been seeing a couple things, and first of all, people who are brought in to take the jobs of workers are not called scrubs, they're called scabs. That is the first thing.
My apologies.
That's the first thing I have to forget. And I'd like to bring in Trish and Jerry, because they've been making a lot of comments, and rather than just reading them, I'd like them to get on mic and just comment on some of the things about the introduction of the characters, if you guys wouldn't mind.
Well, I was thinking, since the last one he was talking about is Connor. Mm-hmm. I'll talk about him because I love reading about characters who see the world differently than I do. Mm-hmm. Because math has always been, as I said in the comments, almost like a foreign language to me. It's not something I grasp easily. And so it started out with his high school experience of he sees life as math, as theory. And so he figures or theorizes how people should react or how things should go, and then he's confused and perplexed when the human element doesn't follow his mathematical model. And his relationships were with other human beings tend to be a little not right. Because he doesn't allow room for the human equation of free will and all that kind of stuff. He just says, well, if I'm doing A plus B, it should equal C, which is happiness. And so what he does is he comes up with this mathematical formula of fun based on video games. And in his whole way of seeing the world and seeing math is all like how other people see trees and birds and flowers. He sees math that way. It's a real thing to him. And as Jerry was saying, it's a descriptive language. And I'm going, yeah, it's a foreign language.
I know it is for me.
But the fun thing to watch him go through in that section of the book is his obsessive nature of proving his model, his mathematical model of how all this should work. And he pretty much just sort of lets the world collapse in on him as he focuses in on his model coming to pass. And it's almost like the mad scientist from the old Frankenstein movie who is standing there and the electricity is coming down and the monster is twitching and he's going, it's alive! It's alive! And it was almost the same thing.
And as you're saying that, you were I was thinking that what you're describing, right, this sort of approach to an appreciation of this grand theory and sort of orienting towards the world through this theory and then being, kind of confused when suddenly you bump up against the world and it doesn't behave the way it's supposed to. I thought you're exactly describing like classical economic theory and how people apply that. So the economic theory that we get exposed to, like in our environment, supply and demand, right? So everyone gets told basic econ, supply and demand. So when supply goes up, right, there's a price adjustment depending on where the supply is. If the supply goes down, prices go up because it's rare. Demand goes up, prices go up, that kind of thing. That's classical economics. And for the folks who really love classical economics, it's about the theory and the elegance of the theory. And there's a lot of math proofs behind the theory. And it's all very, very beguiling, right? The problem is, when you try to interpret the world, how the world behaves, especially people, they don't conform to classical economic theory. They're not rational decision makers, and so when you look at the approach taken by, say, behavioral economics, which looks at, well, how are people actually behaving? does that can we reconcile that with the predictions made by classical economic theory in all these grand equations, or are there gaps? And frequently there are.
As he was saying, it's not based on supply and demand, it's based on envy and greed. And those are two things that you can depend on, but you can't exactly build your house on them, because those, unfortunately, in our world, it's the whole keeping up with the Joneses or keeping up with the other tunes in your guild. Well, they've all got mounts, well, I've got to have a mount, or do I have a bigger sword than they do, or, how can I get better gear so I can get better numbers than that person? And you throw in a competitive nature along with envy and greed, and there you have your whatever.
And the part that I'd want to... and let's put Grid on. Grid. Grid, I definitely want that comment. Let me just wrap up what we're quickly saying about economics, foreshadowing the rest of our economics. And basically what I wanted to say is, remember, he's using a formula for, this could just work this one time. Or it could prove to be something that always happens. But when you read there, if you try pulling out his formula, his fun quotient versus the number of hours and value, the author really is putting in the idea not only of greed, but also envy, and we'll talk about that a lot more. But we're gonna switch over to Grid, because Grid does have a nice comment.
Okay, yeah, and it's switching a little bit in topics.
That's okay.
Character development, and I think that the quote that struck me as an educator, as I'm reading about these 3 young people in 3 different places of the world, and I'm assuming at some point they're going to come together in the virtual world, but the quote with the kid in California, the American kid, the every American kid, where he is sitting in the library or in study hall or something with his earbuds in, and he's speaking Chinese because he's taught himself Chinese, and he was skipping class, and he's playing this game because this has a value to him. And from the book it says, and so what if I was skipping a class? It was social studies, for Christ's sake. They were supposed to be studying China, but Wei Dong knew more about, and Wei Dong, of course, is his pseudonym, this American kid, knew more about 10 times more about the subject than the teacher did, as he whispered in Mandarin into his earwig. He thought that this was like an independent study project. His teachers should be giving him bonus marks. And as I read that, I'm thinking, oh my God, how many of these kids do we have where we're missing the point, where some classroom teacher is standing in front of the room going, and instead of that personalized learning piece that should be taking place. And here's a boy that later in the book we find checks out, runs away from home. And he's a smart kid, a good kid, an affluent kid, but school isn't cutting it for him. And here he is, he starts to describe the real life skills that he's learning in this game, how he's learning to collaborate, how he's learning a foreign language, how he's learning about time zones and dealing with business and time zones. So it's just a kind of a powerful quote that spoke to me as an educator. That's it.
And I was gonna say again. Okay, we'll do it for this week. We will link them to the ISTE-nets. We'll go back and link it to the ISTE-nets and Grid. I don't know if we pull out the Common Core too and show how this fictitious character is learning this outside of the schoolroom. But and Trish, if you want to jump on, you just had a comment. You just gave us a comment there too in text.
Well, one of the things that we're piloting a program in our school district this year that's personalized learning. Mm-hmm. And a lot of personalized learning is based off of the Genius Hour. It's where it's off of Google's 20% thing where you spend a certain amount of time doing something you're passionate about and producing product from that passion. And I was just, as she was reading that, the light bulb kind of went on above my head, and it was like giving kids the opportunity to do Genius Hour in immersive environments, because that is what Wei Dong was doing. He was doing something he was passionate about. He was learning Mandarin, he was collaborating, he was learning about another culture, and he was doing it all in an immersive environment. And that's a pretty powerful Genius Hour. But it'd probably be more than an hour for him.
And Grid, I'm sorry, you're typing in comments too, and I'm just going to pull you guys out when you do things like this. So Grid, you're going to have to say it.
Okay, I'm just thinking maybe we need a new term, meta school or meta education.
Oh my.
and no, he didn't. And we've been asked, and I can see this because this was an important part for me too. And if anybody has a screen that is relevant for this, please bring this up. And Cam, if you want to start the discussion there, or I could start the discussion, because I don't think it's something that we can not discuss.
Early in this section that we were supposed to have read was the part about Mala. When that night when she talked to Big Sister Noor way into the night, and her army had gone off home to bed, and she was getting ready to leave, and the nephew of Mrs. Dibyenu, or whatever her name is, was the one who was watching the shop, as it were, and he threatened her, and she ended up having to fight him, run away, and then I loved her spunk in that it wasn't good enough for her to just hide and hope he would go away and then sneak off home. But she was so angry at her situation, where guys like him felt like they could attack her because she was a young woman alone, that she just beat him into the ground, and then she went home. And that what's terrible about that whole thing to me is that the next day, everybody treats her like she's the villain, that she's the one who has not played her proper role and done this terrible thing to this nephew. And she's really, in some ways, at the mercy of the men that are around her, at the mercy of Mr. Banerjee, and she's got some real strength and spunk. I was saying this past week in the community that I was worried for her. She's got a lot of spunk, but I'm worried about all these cultural things that are surrounding her. And is she going to be able to be strong enough to get past that?
And Chris is pulling, and it was mentioned in the book as Eve teasing, and Chris has pulled some of that out. And yeah, I mean, when we're reading the book, the response from the mother was absolutely you run away. You don't fight back. You should have just run away.
And I mean, as it's an insight to their culture. For us, I mean, we have both men and female abusers in relationships, but I mean, in the Middle East, that type of thing is unheard of. They're still on, males are on top, males have the hierarchical positions, they're the leaders of government and of business, but a female can't do that sort of thing. So it's still that mindset. It's the past still living today.
It's really it's also, it goes beyond that. It goes to even like whether or not you have a right to defend yourself.
Exactly, and immolation is not unheard of, in certain situations, and it really made you feel the smothering kind of frustration that Mala must be feeling, because when she's in a virtual world, she is General Robotwala, and she just tears things up, and she has power, and she has control. And her real life, she has no power. She has no control. Even, with her mother, Mr. Banerjee, with everyone. But the one time she did have power and control was when she defended herself. But even when she exercised that power and control, she was smacked down like a fly under a fly swatter.
And I just wanted to mention that, and Grid was mentioning something too, so you might as well Grid, you might as well get on too. But when it comes to societies and societies' rules and the roles that we're supposed to play in the United States, it's very divided there too. Because if you live in some states on the East Coast of the United States, if a burglar comes in, you are supposed to retreat before using any form of force. You're supposed to leave your place of residence. You are not supposed to, say, defend your place where you're living and where your family might be. While if you go to the West in the United States, it's very different. I mean, there are what's called make my day laws, that if someone invades your home, you have a right to defend yourself. Well, in some East Coast states, you are supposed to retreat. And there's been suits about people fighting, burglars suing people who have fought back. So I mean, it really depends on what the society expects from you, male, female, where you're coming from, and whether or not society allows you to have the power to go ahead and defend yourself. And yeah, please. No, go ahead. I'm dead.
Well, I mean, I think I was afraid. I didn't want to draw this away to this bigger picture thing and dilute this particular part of the discussion, because I do think it's important in this piece with Mala, because I think it illustrates something very acutely that's going on, though, in the bigger picture. For her, I'm really engaged in her story, and I really see for her in particular, but this is, again, a struggle that all the characters are, I think, engaged in, is that I would say that she is struggling in her real life environment to assert herself, to assert her power, to respond to it in a way that's true to who she is. But the challenge is that everyone else and everything else in the environment, has a different idea of who Mala should be, how she should act, what she should do and not do, right? So for me, it's a very, very kind of acute example of what each of the characters seems to be going through, which is, trying to claim some sense of empowerment for themselves, navigate their real life worlds, which are in their various ways applying types of coercion, right? Sometimes direct physical force, like in Mala's case when she's basically assaulted by the nephew. In Leonard's case, about being physically kidnapped because of who he wants to be and what he wants to do, and sent off to a re-education.
Yeah, he was. I mean, yeah, it is.
But each of the characters, I think, each of them I see is trying to respond. And in Matthew's case, basically being coerced by Boss Fong, or Boss Wing, right, his former employer, basically being physically coerced into freely choosing to work with him and set up a franchise, right? So he gets a little bit of the better cut, but he's still under Boss Wing's thumb. So that's coercion, right? But it's on this level of, but it's legitimate because you chose to go ahead and we're going to choose to do business together, so that's okay, and I'm giving you a little bit more, and that's okay. So I think all these characters are kind of wrestling, with navigating these environments and trying to respond to, the way that their environment is coercing, applying pressure to conform.
If I can comment, because I was just thinking about how even Big Sister Noor, when she talks about trying to work on behalf of the workers, and it starts out in the physical world at the I guess it was the weaving factories, I'm trying to remember the exact, and then she found it so much easier when it was in the virtual world at first, and that was very interesting too, that all of these characters are finding more power in the virtual world, and yet the physical world is still coming into play, is still restricting them.
Yeah, I think that part, kind of speaks to the broader thing about in virtual, unless you hear somebody's voice, you don't really know their gender. So gender, race, age, those things that people have an attitude about sometimes and might discriminate in regards to become invisible in the virtual world. So here's these three kids, these teenagers who have absolutely no status really in the real world, are somebody, regardless of those non-status features in the physical world. That was kind of an interesting thing that has, I think, a broader perspective from this book.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just an observation of what Grit had said too, in terms of virtual worlds, and kind of comparing and contrasting with the real. And I do think that in virtual worlds there can be a less direct connection to who one is, or how one appears. So gender, right, or nationality, or socioeconomic background, to a certain extent. If you're talking about visual, right, my direct visual sense of who you are and what categories I can apply to you as soon as I get that information. At the same time, I think we also take quite a lot of who we are into these virtual worlds, and we reveal ourselves because we assimilate, right? We recognize these sort of gender stereotypes or these other things because we've assimilated them. We operate within them. And to a certain extent, they become a part of who we are. So even if we are in a virtual space where people have complete control over how they might appear, they can exercise a certain amount of control about how they communicate, the words they choose, when they choose to speak them, the things that they choose to say. All these things are still clues or communicate things like gender or status or dominance. So all these things still, I think, kind of creep out. If you're paying attention, you can still tease out a great deal about a person through these cues that they give you.
Well, I think so. I mean, great discussion, everybody. So I'm going to have to move us forward in the interest of time, but well done. So Kate's going to start talking a little bit about merging a little bit what was talked about in the game study track last week, and talking about how it also affects some of the stuff we saw this week in our track.
Okay, I'm just pulling this out from when Sherry Jones talked to us. She had us do a close reading of Homo Ludens by Huizinga, and the part that I really want to emphasize there is because when she started talking about this really hit me about how this fits in with what we're doing here on Saturday, the spoil sport. And I know some of the people were in for the spoil sport, so go ahead and jump in as you want. But this was one of the things out of the reading that we did with Sherry on the game studies, how the spoil sport breaks the magic world. And I'm not sure about how I feel about the coward and must be ejected, but think about this. This is exactly what we have Connor doing. Connor is a spoil sport. I mean, he learned the rules of the game, but then he took it further, and he broke the magic world, and he broke it by accumulating much more money than anyone was ever supposed to. and how, think about how all of our characters and players are the outlaws. How they constantly get their accounts banned, okay? And they have to run out and get new accounts. and how really they're making their new community with their own rules. So I just wanted to bring this in to show you how the other track really hits ours too, because in game studies, while this, and it's funny because this is Huizinga, this is someone who wrote this like over 80 years ago, talking about face-to-face games, face-to-face play, and how this is still fitting in with and like Sherry said, that when Huizinga wrote this, he had no concept that there would be massively multiplayer online role-playing games with, 6 million people playing them. He had no concept. Yet some of the things he's talking about absolutely fit. and other guy, I see you guys typing in chat, so please go on to Mike and say a little bit of this.
Well, I was asking Jerry about a certain enterprise and whether it classified as a spoiler sport. His response was, "Not quite yet."
Not quite yet. We're on our way.
You endeavor to be a spoiler sport.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, and I think I've thought about that too, because it's like, okay, well, and Chris is referring to Shomai's House of Fashion and Plateware, which is a little virtual enterprise in WoW. That's a part of my activities with the guild, and it's an exercise, an exploration of economics and things like that within the virtual world. But of course, it's led me to thinking about these bigger things. Like, okay, well, I'm experiencing in this little enterprise a certain measure of success. Not great yet, so I'm not, I don't have more wealth than anyone was intending to. But if I continue along the trajectory and continue to learn and continue to apply what I'm learning, theoretically, I could get there. Now, the question becomes for me, and I think, again, we were just chatting, that I think there are some direct parallels between what we're talking about here in the story and what we might examine in a virtual world and our real-life economy, right? So the question is, as I'm becoming a greater power, I'm amassing more power and more influence and more wealth within the virtual economy, what's my influence? What influence do I become in that economy? And in what ways do I end up, I think, destabilizing the game, spoiling it, right? When I no longer have to be influenced, when I have a greater influence on the rules or the movements. And there's direct parallels in markets as well, right? When you have like stock markets and you talk about, the big fish, and I think even Cory Doctorow even mentioned this in here about the big fish, the big players who can't just go on and buy everything that they want without influencing, right? So like sending out these ripples in the market that defeat what they're trying to do. So they have to make little baby entries, all these little tiny little actions, so that they don't have such a massive effect. But the fact is that they can have a massive effect, right? They can spoil and ruin the game if they assert all the power that they have. So So there's one of those kind of direct connections to like real world problems or real world questions about how economies operate in our relationship to one another that we navigate via those economies.
I can't, it's interesting when I first, of course, the spoil sport term, we've heard it in the past, and it has a little bit of this, oh, you're a spoil sport, you're ruining things. Mm-hmm. But I think it has, there's good and bad in it. Yeah, you're ruining, there might be a ruining of the current game, but then when, I wonder if it isn't just inevitable, if I can use that term, for people to be the spoil sports, because people are creative, because people do come up with original thought, and they think, what if I did it this way instead of the way that I'm being told to do it? And if we don't do that, we'll just be stuck. And I see as we play the game, okay, well let's try doing it this way, and the cheats, the whole cheat section of a game. Oh, we've discovered that if you skirt around the right-hand side, you can get there faster without killing the trash. That kind of thing. Is that being a spoil sport, or is that being innovative problem solving? So it's kind of a fine line between the negative and the positive, and the inevitability of people who can think to be a spoil sport in a positive kind of way.
Well, I think that's one of the things that you see a lot, especially in how games mirror real life. I mean, there are monopolies. Think your power company. There's oligopolies. Think Russia. There's all these different groups that you see, and the other thing is that when you get into some of these game economies, it really talks about size of servers. Yes, I know oligarchs exist outside of Russia, but that's the trendy place for oligarchs right now. It's always Putin versus the oligarchs. It sounds like it should be like an epic, like the new, it's a new trial of Perseus. But those are the things you see is in some of these economies, depending on the number of players, you start seeing a lot of. That's one of the interesting things that I look at game economies for, is that you see a lot of application of going, here is an inefficient market when you start getting into less and less players, because you start seeing collusion, you start seeing cornering of markets, you start seeing people just for the fun of it creating a run on an item that is needed for everyday life. And so these are things that you see modeled in the game that here in the U.S. it's kind of hard to pinpoint that, because, well, most of that's illegal. But the thing is that those are some of the challenges that you can play around with, and it does give players it does give students a bit of a better idea of what does that look like. I mean, they can't really experience it, but the games definitely offer a gateway to show those impacts of those different types of market inefficiencies, if we're going to use our U.S. vocabulary.
And I just wanted to bring it up how that what Sherry's going over in the game studies does really show back up when we're doing our reading for the win, because our characters, our good guys are really spoilers. they are going in and they're doing things that aren't supposed to happen according to the game, and good or bad. Okay, so the next thing I just wanted to bring up. Okay, does anybody know what this symbol stands for? And Trish, come on, Mike, and say your comment, and then we'll get back to the symbol, okay?
Sorry, I had muted myself. What I was saying is that Grid had been asking is metagame activity, spoil sport activity, and I said that I think that the game overlords would like for it to be seen that way somewhat, but in reality, it's, think about Curse Client, where you get your add-ons for the game that help improve your gameplay or help you in your gameplay. Well, add-ons, just in the time I've been playing World of Warcraft, I've seen World of Warcraft take what had been an add-on and incorporate it into the regular game. So what spoil sport activity sometimes ends up doing is it causes the game to improve and grow and evolve.
And
So-
I would agree that I actually, when I was taking notes for this week, I did put mods and add-ons because it's right around the beginning of the reading where the author starts discussing about how no matter what this games do, somebody finds a tunnel, somebody finds a way to go ahead and to tweak the game or to do something that the game wasn't supposed to end up doing. And I think add-ons are a great example. And add-ons and mods have now become, how can I say this? Allowable. Certain ones are allowable, but yeah, the way that they started out, they were not allowable. People weren't, the game designers in the industry weren't happy that people could do these exploits and could do the spoils to it.
Yeah. And what Gridge has posted, the terms of agreement, that just struck me last night because I remembered from last year Chris talking about getting WoW into his college's economics, and you were talking about how you were having to do it, and the lawyers looked at the terms of service, the terms of agreement, and you couldn't bring it in. And then I just started thinking about, and they said something last night that I went, oh, that's me, is that in the book it said something about how we just click through the terms of agreement just to go ahead and get playing. And then Connor, as he's playing, the guys are saying your account has been shut down because you violated the terms of agreement, and he's like, what?
Well, exactly. I mean, the TOS, or the terms of service, are very are written in a way to protect the company from basically everything, and it gives them the right to boot you out for basically anything they want. The other piece sometimes you will hear people refer to is the EULA, or the end user licensing agreement. And so that's the other piece, and of course World of Warcraft has both, so they're doubly covered. So that's what we see here. I mean, the other thing that's interesting with the metagame is really, I think the metagame facilitates all styles of play, because if you want to be a spoil sport, there's websites to go to help you become even a better spoiler sport. If you want to be a cheat, if you want to learn cheat codes, if you want to exploit certain areas of the game, there are meta sites devoted to those type of exploits. With World of Warcraft, it's kind of interesting because there's stories of people creating their own mobs that totally change the game, but it only exists on their computer. It's against terms of service what they're doing, but they're not really affecting somebody else. You also have private servers that people have. I've been hosting, play on my private WoW server, and that's against user agreements. I think Blizzard shut most of those down now, but before we had a lot more of those. So unlike Minecraft wants you to host your own server. They want you to go ahead and repopulate, basically get everyone involved in Minecraft. Whereas Blizzard's like going, no, we only want people using our servers. We don't want people using other servers. So there's a lot of different reasons why they go after that. So there's a piece here. So back to this icon. So we've had some guesses in the chat.
It was mentioned in the book. I'll give you a hint.
Well, yes and no, okay? And it was I was shocked that we had a discussant today who did not know the Wooblies. So
I knew about the Wooblies. I didn't know who the Weeblies were.
Oh, come on, it's a vowel. Okay, it's a vowel.
It's a vowel, but I've heard of the Wooblies before.
Okay, the Wooblies, industrial workers of the world. Okay, this was pretty much it was more of a U.S. movement, but it was, the Dust Bowl, Depression times, stuff like that. One of the famous folk singers who's associated with is Woody Guthrie, where we got the song "This Land Is Your Land, This Land Is My Land," because they felt because Woody Guthrie felt "God Bless America" was too elitist. Too idealistic. but the thing of it is, Weeblies is just a fun way of that they're playing on it and changing the vowels. So the Wobblies do have a history that goes back, and there's a reference to it now. And Cory Doctorow has used this term a couple other times, and it is really about information workers pretty much unionizing, because I don't know if you guys know about when it comes to programming in the United States. Take a look at whether or not you can work on your own, or if all programmers in the United States are required to have at least an LLC attached to them. So go ahead and take a look at that. There's some very interesting things when it comes for information workers, and under what circumstances they're exempt from overtime. And how a lot of our information workers, our IT people, are on call all the time, and it's just an interesting point that gets brought up, and yeah, I see Jerry almost laughing at that.
I'm almost bursting sitting here listening to you talk about this. No, okay. I think what you're touching on now, again, when we're talking about making touch points into the real world, right, and exploring the issues that Dr. Oz is kind of presenting for us in the book. I think that's a direct example of, if you want to call it spoilers, because that's the language you've been using, IWW and other similarly minded people that think, well, no, the rules of this particular game are kind of screwed up. They don't seem fair. It doesn't seem fair that you can expect me to work 100 hours a week without extra pay or benefits, things like that. So they're actively going, no, these are stupid rules to a stupid game. I'm not going to play. If you want to play with me, let's talk about renegotiating the terms, as opposed to just passively accepting the terms of a game being imposed upon them, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, and again, in a way, I'm tying this back to the struggles of each of our protagonists is having, in that they're attempting to renegotiate who they are within the social environments, the cultures, and the relationships that they find themselves in, right? So they find themselves in it, they're born into it. And they're going, the rules.
and Grant, if you want to jump up on Mike too, because you've been saying a lot of nice comments also.
Well, I'm just thinking of this whole term spoil sport. I have a whole different attitude about it. I'm thinking Washington, Adams, the Boston Tea Party, and you know what? I just thought there could be a really good connection with our Machinima Fest next year with spoil sports video games.
Oh, that could be great. Yeah.
Revolutionary. I mean, it's just all kind of coming together, and I never thought of the word spoil sport just in such a positive way, but it can be positive in terms of change and production and production in a positive way, and creativity and problem solving. And I'm not going to put up with this anymore, because I'm going to stand up for myself like Mala did. She's a spoil sport. She stood up for herself, as all these young people are in the book trying to do.
And Chris actually, and I want Trish on mic too, but look what Chris actually pulled up, and I'll get off mic so we can have more people.
Sure. So what I did is I accepted Kay's challenge to look up employment exemption in computer-related occupations. And so this is from the Department of Labor.
The American Department of Labor, right?
Yes. No, it's the International Department of Labor. No, yes, So it's exemption from minimum wage and overtime pay.
Wow. That's awful.
However, Section 13A1 and Section 13A17 of the FLSA provides exemption for both minimum wage and overtime pay for computer systems analysts, computer programmer, software engineer, and other similarly skilled workers in the computer field who meet certain tests regarding their job duties, who are paid at least $455 a week on a salary basis, or paid an hourly rate not less than $27.63.
That's pretty good.
So that's interesting. So let's see, $450 a week times 2 weeks. Yeah, that's only $23,660 a week, a year, I should say.
Well, and on the other hand, at another extreme, I think what is it for tip workers? They're like the minimum wage is like about $2 an hour.
Exactly. Yep.
Or for the person, if you're going to a restaurant who's waiting on your table. I mean, there's clearly, and again, putting this into a broader perspective, I mean, we are defining a hierarchy of value. I mean, these are laws, right? And they're objective and they're on paper. So there's this sort of assumption of, well, they're objective and fair. Oftentimes, you come up with objective and fair in the same sentence. But what we're doing is codifying relative value of workers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're undervaluing.
Oh, and there you're getting into the whole thing of virtual economies, of where do you put your value, and that value is what the economy is based upon in your monetary units, which now I'm starting to speak in that language I really don't understand too well. Where you get
you're doing fine. Go for it.
Where, as they were talking about, is that paper money really in and of itself is not a value. It's where people have decided the value lies. And therefore, when you get into the value of what someone does in a virtual world being equivalent with the value of what someone does in real life, and compensating that person in accordance with that value. And as Chris brought up, a lot of times I think people who don't really understand computers or programming or the things that they do, they just sort of see people on computers as, oh, they're just twiddling around on a computer. They don't see the work and the mental stuff that goes on while someone is doing computer work. And so real life people, I think, don't therefore apply the necessary value to computer related or virtual world related occupations. And so that goes into that. This is dovetailing right into that economics discussion very nicely.
And of course, being an educator again, and the fact that this book is about children, 14, 15-year-old kids, they are involved in this economy. And I can't help but wonder about child labor laws.
Oh, yeah.
And about the fact that the children can do this. Children can. And should we be supporting them and helping them because this is a career for them to be able to contribute and support themselves in the future, or do we need to be hammering them and sending them to military school because they were computer paying attention in social studies class?
Yeah, well, and this at one point this was not an academic concern, child labor laws. There was a time when we did allow children to very fully participate in the economy. The economy at that time involved working in factories, and at some point we decided, yeah, it's maybe not such a good idea. Maybe that the participation in that way seemed more exploitive than positive. So but that's changed. How drastically that sense of value of that activity, how values change so drastically. But because we're so sort of entrenched in the culture that we assimilate now. We kind of see issues through, well, this is how we define it now. This is what's normal now, and we move from there. But child labor laws are in place for a reason.
Right, and Mala and Matthew are absolutely being exploited, and they're being exploited because they know how to do something well, and they happen to be children, so they are being exploited, and they need to be protected. At the same time, there is a potential for them to engage in this activity, to learn, to become contributing, participants in the world, and to support themselves and their families. So it's kind of a weird thing that is changing. It isn't healthy for Matthew to be, or not, maybe not so much Matthew, but the kids in China to be staying up all night and playing these games instead of learning or doing what kids are supposed to be doing, and not being taken advantage of and beat up and, have everything that they own being trashed. That's certainly exploitation. Anyway.
And didn't Mala and her brother work in the factories too in their region before Mala got this job? It's definitely, she maybe is being exploited, but she's doing a lot better for her family than before that.
It's a hierarchy. She's a little higher up on the hierarchy of exploitation.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, she is getting paid much better, and she's not going to school right now. Previously, she was. And I know Yasmin had to go back to school, and she's behind because she was doing Mala's. We're doing games, we were making money off of this before she cut ties, and she had to go back. And so she's doing school, and she's working with Big Sister Nolan, trying to help promote the union that way. And she's getting paid that way, but not as much. Not nearly.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, you have, you're hearing more and more stories about, kids that are the ages of these main characters who are now running, profitable Minecraft servers. They're running as a host for their friends, and they're charging, well, I guess probably they're charging their parents, but they're setting it up where they are charging funds to go ahead and use Minecraft servers, or a variety of different things, website hosting, different things like that. So, I mean, you're seeing that the technology is opening up the realm where instead of kids going out to do the lemonade stand or mow lawns for the summer or different things like that, what people mostly think of traditional kids businesses here in the U.S. is that they're actually seeing a lot more going into technology and going into computer programming, going into games. You're seeing magazines like Entrepreneur and Forbes are now highlighting more and more, younger and younger entrepreneurs and the different businesses that they're running. And we've had a side conversation about farm kids. There's no minimum age. I know whenever I grew up, the minimum age for me was whenever my feet could touch the gas pedal and the brake on the tractor, and then I was big enough to go ahead, and I was old enough to drive the tractor. So I mean, those are things that you see a lot. So there are exemptions. Here in the U.S., we see a lot of exemptions for farm kids, where during the summer I got to miss school because I had to go bring in the harvest, bring in the crops. I had to go sell off the cows, different things like that. So there's a lot of different things you're seeing, a lot of carryover you're seeing. When it comes to child labor laws, yeah, there's a lot of change, but in some cases things stay the same. It was one of the things I said was like, what do you mean old times? That's still going on.
And I'm just bringing this up. I'd like you to meet my two architects, or I should say the Guild's two Minecraft architects, Mousy Moose and Giraffe 619. I will tell you that when we did a session with them like last year, when we were having them explain how they went and designed things, I pulled up a project manager position that was being advertised from a nonprofit about how they had to deal with a client and constant deadline changes and things like that. And it was absolutely how they were dealing with me, because I kept changing my mind. I kept changing deadlines. I kept giving them new things that should be added to this build that they were doing. And when we went and gave the tour of it, I pulled up that project manager position and I said, look, this is what Mousy Moose and Giraffe 619 have been doing. And for Inevitable Betrayal Guild, they are the architects of our Minecraft area. And I just wanted to pull that back to this computer employee exemption. This fits so many people. Okay, the students that we are teaching, but then think at our school districts and at our institutions, how many people fit this? These are the IT people. These are your technology integrators could be put in there. Your learning management system coordinators are put in there. Your directors of technology. All the people that work with you whose cell phone could ring at any time to hear that, oh, the systems went down. What are we going to do? What are we going to do with it? So I mean, this law, this no overtime, affects a lot of people. It affects a lot of knowledge workers and a lot of people who are working in information technology. And chances are they had no idea what the rules of the game were when they necessarily got hired, or knew who is creating the rules to the game.
And I'm afraid to say that Big Sister No and the Mighty Krang and Just Bob definitely found that out the hard way. I don't know. I hope good things happen for them, but we'll see.
No, definitely. So, we'll go ahead and move on. So, virtual economics. So, I'll go ahead and talk about the stuff. We've sort of talked a lot of it, but we've sort of covered a little bit to it. Now we're going to talk about more in depth. This week, really, as you're reading, you're going to hear more about currency exchange, arbitrage, markets, black, gray, and white markets, marketing channels, and also envy. So, for those of you that are there, what determines the value of a currency?
I know my answer, but I'm going to wait.
Anyone?
Jerry's answer is my answer because I don't even understand.
You're going to appropriate my answer. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
I think what determines the value of a currency is what you can get for it that is of value.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for the early pioneers and the American Indians, I mean, they gave them beads and junk,
Mm-hmm.
but it had a value to the people for whatever that they were trading for, and they got food in replacement. So that currency was beads and bits of glass or whatever it was, and so I think it's what has value for the person, what you can get for it. Otherwise, it has no value. And I mean, I've done a little traveling, and when you do the exchanges, when you go to a different country, and you have a whole lot of something, but it really doesn't, like, you don't really understand what a whole lot of these little bills with funny pictures are until you go to buy something, and then you realize, oh my gosh, I needed that many or that few. So then it has value because now I got a meal out of it, or a garment or something, shoes.
Yeah, I think that was a very fair, very good stab at it. Anyone else?
Someone goes, shoot.
Okay. Any activity on the chat out in the world?
Out in the real world? Is that what you're going to say?
Yeah. No, I think he's measured. Out.
He means the YouTube channel, I'm sure.
Not that I'm seeing. So.
Okay.
Oh.
No, I think you're in the right direction, Grid. Personally, I think there's a lot of discussion, a lot of going back and forth. When people look at economies and they try to define value, and again, each of the traditions of economic theory, schools of economic theory, attack it in a different way or define it in a different way. For me, where I land is ultimately there is no value except what people put on things, right? Ultimately, because if you take anything you think of as valuable, anything at all that you can name, dollar bills, diamonds, a steak, anything that anything that someone can hold up and go, well, I think this is valuable. Take people out of that picture. Take all the people out of that picture. Now, how valuable are these things? It's a nonsense question, right? Mm-hmm. So when we get, go ahead.
Well, I think it depends on the situation and like our basic needs, like shelter, food, and clothing and water. I mean, those would have value if you were stranded on an island. Whoever has those would have the most power.
I agree. I agree. So part of it's contextual, right? But in what you're saying, I would also point out that, well, the fundamental context is that there are people, right? And these people have needs. So I think that there is a hierarchy. For me, when I look at value, there is a hierarchy of value. You can ground certain things on human values, like I need air, I need water, I need food to continue to exist. So there are things that I will, in most cases, count as very, very valuable because they allow me to continue to exist. So there is value there, but I'm still, because I'm a person, I want to continue that, right? So that's where the value is coming from. But if you look at, if you're talking about, and this is where the discussion gets weird, okay, well, some people will say certain things have inherent value. So fiat currency or your paper money, there's no real value there. The real value is in gold or diamonds. But what is it about gold or diamonds that's inherently valuable about them, aside from a mass of other people going, that's valuable?
Scarcity.
Why is scarcity inherently valuable? For example, Ebola is relatively scarce. Yet, not many people consider it desirable to acquire in the same way that they would point at gold.
Because somebody has more than the other person.
It should.
What was that, Trish?
Because someone has more than the other person.
More is Ebola?
Well, no, not necessarily Ebola, but
Ebola doesn't sparkle.
Well, again, the quality of having more, and again, it isn't inherently valuable. If you can't say, well, more of anything makes it more valuable. More of Ebola doesn't make it more valuable to someone. I don't want any of your Ebola. No matter how much you have. You can have a lot more than me. I don't want any.
But so, Jerry, it's easily transferable.
Well, yes.
Well, going back to the hierarchy of needs, I mean, if you're not going to trade Ebola for a bowl of soup. No one's going to take it. But, if I give you this shiny thing, and then, you're going to give me a bowl of soup. Okay, so now once your hierarchy or needs are met and you've got food and shelter and a nice car, then you go to other things, a bigger house, vacations, nice stuff, artwork, you go to more of that, and it is, and you get that from, money that
Why do you want those things?
Because they make you feel good.
Why do they make you feel good?
Well, vacations always make you feel good because it's nice.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing, and I don't, I'm not being facetious and asking why. I mean, it is. Because I think it's very, very important to ask these grounding why questions, even if you can't kind of put your finger down and nail down. This is the answer. I think it's a very, very important thing because, again, getting back to tying this back into the story of our characters and kind of what's going on with them in their struggles, on a certain level, they have a certain why. They may not be able to define it, but they're strong. There's a strong urge in them, right, to spoil the games that they find themselves in, to try something different, to fight no matter. And that is valuable to them, right? They may not be able to explicitly say, well, I want this and it's valuable because, but there is something in me that compels me to move in that direction as opposed to this other, where I feel like there's less value for me, right? These things are important because I think it gets directly to this relationship between the formal structures that we have. Like, okay, well, this is the formal economy. This is how it's supposed to be running. Or if you're talking about education, or we were talking about education earlier, I see a parallel there. Well, this is how education is supposed to be properly structured and delivered, and this is how you properly do it. And yet, and we're supposed to get the right results at the end, right? I mean, the good things are supposed to come from this. So asking the question of why is very, very important because it gets right to, well, what are we really doing? What's the real meaning here for me, right? And we've been talking about, I think we've been wrestling with meaning in terms of, well, is this game fun for me or not, right? But that's a kind of value. That's a kind of meaning. It's like, okay, well, what do you mean? So you're placing a value on that, even if you can't strongly define it. It's there, and it's a real motivator. And I think that's a really important thing when you're talking about, especially economies and or the relationship of individuals between themselves within the greater whole of the economy. It gets right down to meaning. So exploring, well, why, once I have my basic needs met, which I think a lot of us can say, okay, well, we could share those values. We can understand that on a very fundamental level, why someone might want to continue to exist. All right, so far so good. We can agree on that. But why would I want a bigger house if the house I have is adequate? Why do I need a bigger, faster car when what I have is adequate? Why do I need a yacht if I don't like going to the beach or the ocean? But people are compelled. Now, are they compelled because there is a real value there in the same way that there's the value, the urge to pursue the fun? Or is it because, well, you got one? It seems, that's what I'm supposed to do to seem successful is I need my yacht. Otherwise, I can't join the yacht club.
I think, Jerry, you're touching a little bit on the envy portion of our presentation. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So, but no, definitely, I agree. My response to why gold and diamonds have value, because they're shiny and we all have ADD in the end. Brian actually brought up what was talked about in the book. He posted in YouTube, said that confidence in particular, in a particular economy has an impact on its currency value as well. So, I mean, that's other pieces that we talk about. And that moves us into the next part, which is the currency exchange. So in the book, you get to read about Matthew and how he made money and how he took the money and he went ahead and he was able to convert virtual currency into real currency. So what you're seeing here is that a lot of the virtual currencies, they value, the way they are valued and the way they are traded is similar to, your actual national currencies that are out there. For either work, you have to have the basics of there being a buyers and sellers. So the other thing I wanted to show people is this. I don't know if people have seen the first Meta exchange or not. So this is a website out there, and what it is it is a allowed site for a couple different games, and you can either pay in US dollars or euros. And basically, what you can buy is you can buy iMoveU credits, Linden's, Tory credits. Which is actually, I had to look at what Tory credits were, and they were kind of fun. It's a robot, it's a little animation type of game that you have robots that you allow them, you create new martial arts moves for them, and they beat each other up and destroy each other. So it's like battle robots basically. Then you have Friendsu gold coins, Friends Hangout tokens, and Nuvera notes. So these are all currencies you can purchase for a variety of different dollars, and you can buy and sell, and you can also, if you want to put a sell in. Basically, how these exchanges work is that you will say on this board, you will say, "Hey, I am looking for dollars." You have bids and you have offers. So what you do is you list what your minimum is, the currency you want to sell. So if you want to sell Linden's and you want to get US dollars, you could go ahead and it'll pull up just that transaction to show you what the most recent transactions are. And then it gives you the ability to go ahead and set up how much you want to do. You can find the best price available. You can put a limiting order in it. So there's a lot of different things you can do to exchange traditional currency for virtual currencies and back and forth. And so these are games that allow you to go ahead and either buy game gold to continue your play or exchange game gold for US dollars. So First Meta Exchange is the name of that website we're looking at right now. So, but there's a lot of different things that are out there. What you saw with Matthew is he used what was more the black market version of these type of markets. And also sort of Jerry was starting getting into this as well, the idea of nominal value versus real value. The idea of, what is it actually worth? So an example here would be in a game where Matthew was like, hey, we earned $3,400. So $3,400. So, and they had no idea, no concept of what $3,400 was. And then what happened is the real value kicked in. So the very next sentence, he explained to all his buddies, well, that's 8,080 bowls of dumplings. And so that was the real value. That's the value in context. So in finance, we'll talk about future value or present value. We'll look at it, amortized value. There's a lot of different things that go on there. Where the nominal value is just the base value. It's what it's worth on the note. So that's really sort of a thing that you got to see, a really cool idea you got to see there. But he spent a lot of his time on this term, arbitrage. This is really where he went ahead and set out what is arbitrage. And basically what arbitrage is, it's the practice of profiting off of someone else's mistakes or ignorance. So it's exploitation. Yay! Basically what it's looking at inefficiencies that happen, and it's looking at how can you take advantage of them. And typically it involves buying a low-priced item, and so a mispriced item, and then reselling it at a higher price. You rarely ever see anyone trying to, if you arbitrage trying to buy a high price and go to a low price, sell at a low price, that doesn't work. So Trish has a comment. Go ahead.
I have a comment that I raised my hand that I'm the practice of profiting off someone else's mistake or ignorance. That's me.
Oh, that's you. Okay. and yes, Cam asked if that's what Connor's doing, and yes, that's what Connor was doing, was arbitrage. Is that he was buying? Yes, Jerry, go ahead.
Well, I would also point out that most of the activity that occurs in today's stock markets, like day trading, that's arbitrage.
Yep.
Buy low, sell high. That's the monster. That is a monster part of what makes our economy and the world go round today. If just to put it in a little perspective, think about that.
Well, exactly.
Doesn't make me feel any better.
No, I it would, but yeah, it's a little. It keeps me up sometimes too.
Yeah, and that's the thing about it. And arbitragers are, again, these are people who typically are either have add-ons like computer programs that spot these mispricings or these changes in the market price of things, or there's somebody who have done this for so long that they just get a feel for it, and they know exactly what the prices should be, and they know exactly where they traditionally price at.
And I'd have to say something like before computers were so ubiquitous that's what it was like. The old commodity traders, the old commodity traders, it was always, oh, I got a feeling in my gut. I've noticed that someone has been talking to something else. There's something that's going to happen in the market. There's something that's up. And yes, I used to make those simulations for students at the University of Nebraska, and the thing about it is, it really is my gut is telling me this. And nowadays, rather than those kind of old commodities traders who just knew when something was going to happen, instead what you really have is people, besides the programs and the algorithms doing it, there are people who do pattern recognitions based on things that are happening and make decisions based on that.
Well, in Doctora also, it ties back to an earlier part of our conversation about game spoilers. Makes a very pointed, makes a very highlighted and emphasized point that now you've come to the point where certain advantaged players in this particular game can afford to invest in these nanosecond sort of trading systems. So you don't get, everyone doesn't get access to this. You have to be privileged enough a player to afford to be able to get this. And now you have a very significant greater advantage, even greater advantage now in the market, in that you can see and notice and exploit these differences on a nanosecond level, where some Joe or Jill day trader working off their computer is not going to have that capability. So you start to play at a higher level, at a kind of a metagame level, but the rules start to become different, right? While you're roaming around there up in the market clouds, as it were.
Well, exactly. And someone in the chat here said that isn't that a lot of speculation and leads to bubbles? And the thing about arbitrage is what arbitrage is looking at is you're tracking the trend. So if prices are increasing, if you're arbitraging, you're only looking at, so basically what you're doing as an arbitrager is you're looking at the floor, you're not looking at the ceiling. You want the prices to rise because that's what you're doing, because then you're buying things at lower prices and you're selling at higher prices. So the goal of the arbitrage, or the ideal in the arbitrage, is that if you're an arbitrager, you're going ahead and you're trying to go, well, I'm looking for specific items that are growing in price. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep circulating goods where I will buy at a lower price and I will resell them at a higher price because I am more effective, or I am better informed than the person buying it, because someone who's buying it from me, even though they're trying to go ahead and arbitrage, they may be trying to arbitrage you. But those are things that you deal with a lot. And the key to this is usually it's a very quick turnaround time. It's something that it's someone, Jerry posted the nanosecond trade. Yes, exactly. It's a hold and sell, hold, sell, hold. You really don't have a lot of hold strategies if you're arbitraging. You can stockpile, but the only reason why you would ever stockpile is if you're playing a longer term game and you're saying, okay, prices are depressed now, but in 3 weeks from now, it's like turkey prices. Turkey prices now, leading, for most of the year, is very low. But come Thanksgiving, there's going to be a huge demand for turkey, so I'm going to go ahead and stockpile my frozen turkeys. So there's different things you can play around with.
Well, in not to spoil the conversation, but also I think this is a really significant point that jumped out at me that Dr. O made when he looked at all these dynamics and said, look at what these folks are doing, especially the banana example,
yes.
Right? So that he also points out that it's a great way to make a buck, and you go through this arbitrage thing, and at the end, nothing useful is actually created, and you've profited from it. Again, this is a huge part of what makes the world go around these days.
Well, exactly, and in the financial markets, we call it liquidity. The arbitragers and speculators, they provide the liquidity of the market, which makes the market run. So the biggest thing about it here is that, the example is exactly what Jay just referred, the bananas from Mrs. Hungry. Really, the benefit of arbitrage is that in some cases it does provide a stabilizing force in the market. It's getting rid of anybody. But what it is, it's focused on the bottom. It's really looking at people who are mispricing it poorly, and you're taking advantage of it being mispriced. The other thing it looks at is raw materials. If the finished good is this price, and the number of raw materials it takes to make it is less than what the finished good is, then you can also arbitrage that way as well. So there's different ways to look at it. The biggest thing is as we said, is you always run the risk of ending up with the bananas, or as Kay is showing, you end up with ore sometimes.
And this was my misgotten mithril buying on one of the servers. We ended up mithril was going for a very low price. I bought up a lot of it. Actually, this whole tab used to be filled with it, and I was hoping that it would continue. It would be secular, and the high price would happen again. Well, it didn't. So slowly but surely, I've been selling it off. But yes, this was my if it was the food retail business, this would be considered my wall of shame, where all the milk didn't get bought up, but instead it was mithril ore. So I just wanted to give you the example of when you have bananas and have nothing to do with them.
Oh, well, I mean, you could use them for crafting and stuff, I'm sure.
That was not the goal. The goal was to buy low and sell high. It was an arbitrage fail. Okay, so I just wanted to give you guys the example.
Well, Grid does say at least mithril doesn't go bad like bananas do. So the other big piece in there was forecasting models. This was basically the entire thing about Connor when Connor was introduced, is that Connor was all about looking at how do I come up with a mathematical attempt to predict market activity in the future. And so typically these type of models look at price, volume, direction of the market, a lot of different things. An example there are his equations. The big caveat you have to remember for all mathematical models is all things remaining constant. That really is your caveat that you always see with all the mathematical models, because if someone starts acting in a way that is not normal or is not traditional. So everyone remember Greenspan? What was Greenspan angry about? He was angry about irrational exuberance. So
it was measured anger.
Exactly. It was measured, yes. But that's because he sat in the tub before he came up with the term. So the thing is that yeah, I mean, really what it is that models are built on assumptions that things will stay the same. And so those are the things about the forecasting models. You've had plenty of there's tons and tons of forecasting models that are out there. And some of them work and some of them don't. Some work for a while, Black-Scholes, and then some crashing horrifically, Black-Scholes. when things change. So there's a lot of different things that are out there that you can look at. And also, last, we start wrapping up with the economics of envy. So this is whenever Connor was talking about the game with the chips and the sort of psychology experiment, where basically the emotion that had driven them into that experimenter's lab wasn't greed, it was envy. And envy wasn't about what was good, it's about what someone else thought was good. So in other words, what it is that you may not really value the piece that you're going after, but you're seeing someone else is obviously going out and trying to buy the good. So you should probably try out and get that good as well. Or everyone else is trying to get it, so you want to go ahead and get it as well. And so there actually is a very large study out there. It's very interesting. Comes from a lot of different academic disciplines that are looking at envy and the economics of envy that are out there and how it drives decision making, whether beneficial or negative. But usually it's a negative piece. The other interesting thing that you're introduced to is terms of service. Whenever Connor got shut out, they all cut him off for violating their terms of service. Specifically, he had interfered with the game economy by engaging in play that was apt to cause a financial panic. And so financial panics are something that everyone tries to avoid. No one likes bank runs. Nobody likes people trying to get their money out of financial institutions as fast as possible. And now we're going to go ahead and quickly look at Area 52.
Well, I actually changed my mind. We're not going to Area 52. Why? Because the economy's so bustling. So instead, for this one, for our example, because I saw this as we were doing this, let's instead be on Sisters of Elune, a smaller economy. But here's why we're going. We're going to look at some of the things. Now, I'm going into the auction house, and I'm going to look at some examples of people who might be arbitraging. So I'm going to take the example of armor. So that means gear here, at least in World of Warcraft. And you have different types of gear depending on what role you're playing. So I'm going to hit up cloth. So this means people who are playing magical casters. And then I'm going to take a look at chests, which are your robes, your shirts, stuff like that. And let's hit a search for this. And look. I can go ahead and I can look based on rarity, level, time left in the auction house, the seller, or the current bid. But I'll go current bid. So what can I buy for 2 gold? Durable tunic of the whale. Okay, so that's what I can get for 2 gold. Then I can come down here. I can see some waterfall stuff. They're priced at 35. Some laughing skull. Somebody seems to be flooding the market with wizard weave. Then there's a Duskwood Intellect. Now we're getting into the hundreds. And then I'm starting to see some familiar names. Wait a second. Whooping keeps showing up here. Okay? Not only do I see, there's Whooping. Whooping's putting a lot. It looks like Whooping might be a market driver in this area. And look, we have Lunar Vest of the Owl. Oh, and I can look at everything. So I can take a look at my character and see what it looks like. And then the Sears one. Now we'll try Royal Blouse. And now Chris is trying to show us something. So Lunar Vest of the Owl. And I'll get off mic and please feel free to say whatever it is you wanted to.
Oh, I was just comparing what you have. So your Lunar Vest of the Owl, Whopping is selling it for 192 to 549. And over here in Area 52, we have one such item, but that's selling between 403 and 425.
Okay, Chris, let's try another comparison. Do you have a Sears robe? That should be easy to look up. And the thing about it is Area 52 is so big, that's why Chris is trying to isolate it, while on Sisters of Elune, it's easier. Okay, so let's see. We're looking at some other things. Oh, a big one here. Now, it's interesting. Whooping is letting you bid, or you can go for the buyout. Now, Jerry, do you want to explain the rationale why someone would do a low bid but a high buyout?
Sure. Yeah. The way I think of it is that the buyout, what you're putting there, you're looking for, at least as a seller, you're looking for the impatient buyer. The buyer who just wants it now. The buyer is not concerned necessarily about the price as much, at least not primarily. has the resources and doesn't have the time or the patience. That's, they're willing to pay that premium. The bid is for someone who maybe is more patient, more concerned about handing over the resources, paying the gold coins, and is really more concerned about whether they can get the best price. But they're willing to wait because you'd have to, right? And you risk the chance of actually losing the piece to another bidder because, okay, your bid goes up, it becomes a high bid, so it's an auction. And other bidders who might be interested in that piece will get to bid, or the impatient buyer might come in and just buy it outright, right? So what Whooping in that case is doing is playing to both markets. Others will take a different approach. Like, for example, Shomai, I rarely list a piece for a bid. I really focus a lot of my pricing strategy on the impatient buyer. So my bid price and my buy price are the same, right? Because I'm not looking to cater to the bid buyer.
And when I'm looking here, we're starting to see, again, this is Sisters of Balloon, so much smaller market, but you see Whooping in A class. They're really starting to, they start at about what? At about 100, 150, and they start there. Then all the way down here, we don't see a Shomai until we don't go ahead and see a Shomai until we get to the 800s. I mean, so it's very different market. Like
Yes.
Whooping in A class will just put anything out there, but there's 53 items here on the market, and it's not till 50 that Shomai decides to actually come into play.
Very familiar with Whooping in A class. They've both started to encroach on the armor market.
Oh no.
At the same time. And they're willing to discount. Right.
Yeah.
So there are cases in which, if I'm really adamant about wanting to sell a piece, then I'm forced to maybe offer a bid price that's at least as competitive as what they're putting out there, and a buy price that's a little bit more competitive than what they're putting out there. But yeah, that's an example where the competition, if it's not collaborative competition or an attempt at forming a monopoly, isn't in play, then that's where you have a dynamic where the competition can have the potential of driving down price, which is better for the buyer than it is for the sellers.
Yeah, and I'm seeing Whopping or Whooping, he or she is just putting stuff in. They're even going for 4 gold stuff. I'm like,
Yeah, high volume, low price. So discount seller.
Yeah. And yeah, seriously, I'm looking. I'd say about 50% of the stuff, well, maybe 40% of the stuff here is owned, is being put on by him. And then A class, and then again, when we get to the very end, is when we start to see Shomai there. And I'm going to go over to Chris's, and I'll let Chris get on mic and tell us what's happening on Area 52.
Well, one of the things you see on Area 52 is that there's definitely because of the number of sellers on Area 52, you don't really get the big, huge price jumps unless it's like the only piece that's on the market. It's all about scarcity and it's all about supply and demand. Here in Area 52, what you commonly see is this practice here, where someone will go ahead and they will list a piece. In this case, a crafted Malevolent Gladiator's Mooncloth robe. And they'll go ahead and they'll list it for just under 200 gold. And then someone else comes along, and they downgrade it.
$99.99.
Exactly, and this is your penny wars. And this is the challenge you have. Like, this is a great example of commodity pricing in an environment. Because with commodity pricing, when everyone else sells a same exact good, naturally what the definition of commodity is, it's the same. It's like corn. My number 2 yellow corn is the same as Jerry's number 2 yellow corn. It's the same thing. So what happens with a commodity pricing system is if there's not the scarcity, if there's an overabundance of supply, then what you get is you get a race to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to say an arbitrage thing I'm doing real quickly. Let me switch. Is I saw somebody had something unreasonably priced and they're on short now. So what I've gone and done is I've gone and bidded on this short. That means that it's probably less than 2 hours. Now, if the seller is smart, they'll come and possibly, like they'll come and possibly try and do something about this. But the bid is 17 gold, the buyout is 4.97, and they are pricing it like for the impulse buyer, right? But yes, somebody said it was a wonder if Shabai's house will come and outbid me, and I really don't care because I'm doing this for purposes of education. So that would just prove my point, okay? So, but crafted dreadful gladiator, right? And we'll go ahead and see. Let's see if this is even pretty. Well, it gives you a thing around the neck, okay? So it's like this crafted gold thing around the neck, okay? So, but if I look down here, I have to scroll a bit until I started seeing it again. So otherwise, it is selling by Mace, who's long, at 220 gold. So this would be an example of me trying to, take advantage of somebody else because they made a low bid.
Well, yeah, that's absolutely what an arbitrager is depending on, is that you'll have participants listing things, participants in the market who aren't doing exactly what you're doing right now, which is just look up and say, oh, how is everyone else pricing this, or what's been the history of pricing on this, and they'll just throw it out there for a couple gold pieces, and you know that, wow, this thing gets sold regularly at several hundred gold pieces. So if you buy that little piece at 2 gold and you're able to sell it for several hundred, that's a really nice turnaround and profit, right? So you are absolutely taking advantage and exploiting sort of information asymmetry, right? Your read of the market is better than the naive player who comes in and just kind of throws something out there, and you're exploiting that information awareness difference, that deficit that the other player has.
Well, exactly, and that's what you see a lot with arbitrage. It's all about going ahead and looking at exploiting those differences, and that's the difference of someone who's in the market versus who's not in the market, and those are things that you're always challenged with and dealing with when it comes to the different markets that are out there. And so we'll go ahead and we'll start winding down and see. Blue, let's talk about predictions.
Yes. So, okay, so making sure I'm on the right page. So, after reading week 2, I feel I'm really drawn into the whole Big Sister Nor union, and I really want to see what's happening. I think Leonard is safe for now. I don't think he'll be fine very quickly. Maybe there will be some sort of private investigator or his parents might hire to find him, but I think that's kind of far-fetched. But I'm hoping that Mala joins up with Yasmin and they find out how to get them out of jail. I don't know how. I'm not sure how. Usually, America's kind of skippy with jail, but foreign jail is probably much harder to get out of. So anybody else with predictions, please, by all means.
I'm wondering if Weidong or Leonard is going to find kind of life in the rough part of LA rougher than he expects. Like he totally thinks, I can survive this, I'll be just fine. And I wonder if maybe his cushy upbringing has blinded him to what life might really be like in a rougher part of town. So I'm interested to see about that.
Well, he's taking a very romanticized sort of framing of it, right? Because he keeps saying, well, it's just like my grandfather, coming to the country as an immigrant and having to make his way and figure things out, just like the folks, sitting around him in the computer cafe, in the internet cafe. So yeah, I wonder if that sort of idealism is really going to come crashing down if he bumps up against a much harsher sort of reality. In kind of the similar way with Matthew, or Boss Fong, as he's set himself on his course. Last time when we talked, my concern was, or question I had for him as a character is, would he try to empower himself and free himself through finding a different course, for breaking out of this arrangement, this system, this environment that he's finding himself in sort of being under the thumb of Boss Wing, and would he be able to break free of that, or would he just become a part of it? And so far, what I've seen is, well, he seems to be kind of getting sucked in, right? Because his group of employees, now he's a boss, and he has his group of employees, is what he calls them, ends up coercing other players in game kind of towards their venture, and in the end, he's really, just very pointedly forced to choose to run a franchise for Boss Wing. So it seems like, he seems to be getting sucked into becoming a part of the system rather than freeing himself from it. So I'm kind of curious to see whether this sort of track continues for him and what that might mean.
Anyone else?
I think we'll do some more economics.
Grid, did you have any input? Your mic is muted. There you go.
I haven't read as much as everyone else has. I'm just wondering if they're all going to come together. And I haven't read as far as, everyone else has. I'm a little short this week. But I'm just thinking that their paths are going to cross. That's what I'm curious about. Maybe you've already gotten there.
That'll be something to look forward to.
And I'm just going to jump on because Blue actually shared this with us. But when it comes to market intelligence, the person we were talking about, the competitor, Blue just pulled up his activity feed. so that we can take a look at what he's doing. Let's see. He's level 90, but he's playing with, Oxania. So what's that? That's saying that he's doing exactly what Leonard's group was talking about doing, is that they're going back and they're farming things that they're way higher level to grab, and oh look what he got off this. It's an item level 90, but the armor level is only 286. There's only one reason you're pursuing that is because you're going to sell it. You're not pursuing it so you can be a better player. And then take a look. We have a couple other things that he's doing. He's been going back to all of the old places, just like they were describing about Leonard's group, going back and farming them. So it does look like he is pretty much doing the game he's playing is put stuff on the auction house.
Oh, go to a summary. I'll show you his character page. Like, his gear isn't even maxed out. It's like 500. 505 is his item level. He has maxed out on like these 3 pets though. He has level 25 pets, which is pretty impressive. But he doesn't have a lot of achievements though. Nope.
Yeah, so he, here's the thing. He is going, and yeah, you're right. Here's his achievement.
Yeah, he's got 8 Arxia kills.
Yeah, so he's...
That's a lot of time to spend there.
Yes, it is. So I mean, the thing of it is, he's spending a lot of time collecting these goods. So this has become his game. It seems more like, I mean, he could totally be a high-level character who's raiding, but at least on this character is his auction house person.
And you're right, level 25 to sell for the pets.
Yes.
They sell very high. Oh.
Well, exactly, and that's the other thing that you see a lot is that in a game like World of Warcraft, it's not unheard of for players to play on specific characters, and then they have different characters that they call bank tunes, and their purpose is to store stuff. They'll typically be located in cities, and they'll be selling the stuff off in the auction house. The idea is that the larger, the bigger guys can go ahead and grab all the free loot, and they're shipping it back to the lower level tune that is going ahead and just making a lot of the money, and so they're transacting it that way. It's part of that distributive buying. I mean, it could be, it looks like whooping, sorry, we're looking at your character, but it does look like, that basically this is his main farming tune, where he's going out and he's grabbing mats there. I don't see a lot of achieves for him. He's doing a lot of achievements, but I don't see a lot of progressive endgame rating or whatever. But the thing is there are plenty of people out there who will go ahead and their main is one tune, but then they have a total different tune that's selling. And one of the common tactics used to be is that you kept your bank tune under level 10, because if it was under level 10, it wouldn't show up in the WoW Armory. And so people couldn't pull up your feed like this. And so there's different games that people play. I mean, Jerry talked about the distributed buying and distributed selling before, so that way you don't try to arouse suspicion. But in a game like World of Warcraft, it's easy for you to have 4 or 5 tunes that are selling similar items and playing in the same market. And now you can't buy from yourself. You can't inflate the prices unless you have multiple accounts, because Blizz limits you to only having, you can only bid on things that aren't from your account. So if you have double accounts, then you could actually have a price war, and you could manufacture the price war on yourself.
Well, just and really quick on that, in terms of connecting this back to the earlier part of our discussion about, well, once you get to a certain level of resources and being a privileged player in the game, you start to have certain powers to affect the market that weren't there before. So when I first started off and I had a few, maybe a few silver pieces, much less gold pieces in my pocket, I couldn't dream of controlling a market for a particular good, right?
Yep.
So I didn't have the power to buy it all up and make it scarce. I do now, right?
Oh, God.
I find myself sometimes making pieces rarer, more rare on the market than they would otherwise be, simply because I have the buying power to do it. And that allows me then to maintain my higher prices for certain pieces, right? But that's clearly market manipulation. That's not how it's supposed to work.
Nope.
That's not fair play. That's not how the free market's supposed to work, but that's how it does work.
Well, exactly. And before I introduced World of Warcraft as the unmanaged capitalistic structure that it is. It really is. There are things you can do in WoW that you can't do in real markets, and those are things that, when you're using this as an example, you explain to your students. And again, it comes back to how you know the game. So it looks like Kay might be buying up copper ore.
Yeah,
and so these are small. So
this is an example. There's not a lot of movement on here. It would be very easy to control the copper ore market right now at Sisters of Elune. Look, to buy this, look at how much it's going to cost to buy this out, right? Okay, it's going to cost less than 40 gold to buy this out. And if you had a lot of copper ore, you could then, start putting portions of it. You could put portions of it on the market. This happens a lot around holidays with specific goods that are needed for specific holiday items that happen in game. So that's a time it's really easy to do. And again, Sisters of Elune is a small server, so it's really easy to do this, while on Area 52, much more difficult. It would take a lot to control just about anything. So we're about to wrap it up, so let me get off mic and give it to somebody else.
All right, so next up we have our Week 3 overview. It should be track 2 for the win. I think we got carried away with it being Week 3. So what we'll see is on Tuesday morning, on July 29th, we will have a quick preview of the week to come, as we normally do.
All the book readings. Continue to read over the weekend. I mean, you can have a break today, but I mean, just continue reading. I mean, it will be another 100. It will be another 100 pages for Week 3, because we're reaching the relative halfway point of the book club, and we haven't really gotten to the halfway point of the book, but we will get there. I promise. But I mean, just keep reading.
All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Thank you all for participating here in the Hangout. And everyone, have a good afternoon. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.